It's Lloyd, and I'm here with JC and, of course, the Thunderous One. And today we're going to talk about atheism. And also, I was traveling for the last 2 weeks. I was only home for 24 hours in between. And yeah, but I'm back now. And I luckily won't be getting on any planes or doing any strange travels for about 3 weeks. And yeah, but I will let you know in advance before I travel. So atheism is not a neutral ideology. It is not an ideology that takes the worst of human beings, extracts it out of us, aka religion, and then provides us with a rational, loving, balanced, wholesome society. No, we get woke. We get men having babies, and we get eugenics, we get violence, we get, well, the worst of humanity. We'll talk more about that. Just so, by the way, if you check in the pinned comment, you'll see I've got the Atheism Primer with a link to Dropbox. Everyone can download. I synthesized all of my shows on atheism into a document that you can download. You can follow along, at least have an idea as to what is wrong with atheism. And there is a lot wrong with it. So welcome, everyone. Thanks for being here. Islam is certainly the problem. And of course, we have a problem with the Red-Green Alliance, so the, shall we say, the Atheist Islamic Alliance. And it happened in Iran. The socialists, the atheists, the two are pretty much synonymous. They, of course, aligned with the jihadis. They helped the jihadis get into power because, of course, these forces are all anti-Western, they're anti-rational, they're anti-life. There's a lot of negativity there, unfortunately. And yeah, and then the Muslims murdered the atheists, the socialists, and took over the country. And we're seeing the same in the UK. We're seeing the same. Think about Zach Polanski, the Green Party. Think about what's happening in the US. You're seeing the same kind of alignment, and we're going to see the same kind of disaster if we don't talk about this and, of course, get people to, well, do something about it at a social, political level. So, guys, over to you. Welcome, welcome. So what are we talking about today, guys, from your perspective?
Hi, Lloyd. Hi, JC. And hi to everybody in the chat and those that will be watching the show later. Thank you for being a part of the show. And I think what we're going to be looking at is the influence of atheism is a lot more sinister than what people realize. They probably see it as a subjective, we just want to live our life in a peaceful way without any form of theistic influences. But the reality is you're replacing it with a vacuum, and the vacuum is dangerous. That's probably what we're going to look into. And those who have listened to the show with me on the panel over the few years that I've been partnering with Lloyd will know that even though I come from an Islamic background and I'd like to think I have a good understanding of Islam, I consider atheism to be the most destructive, dangerous and divisive, toxic and corrosive mindset to have ever been conceived and influenced on mankind.
I agree. Yeah. And JC?
Well, hello all. And yeah, I totally agree. As I've mentioned sometimes here on the channel, I'm an ex-atheist, and I can see full well how atheism is basically taught to people, and how you can tell that is not true when you actually see the lies and where they actually lead to. So, and like Lloyd, you've started by saying this alliance between Islam and, well, the green, black or green, red alliance is everything is part of the same movement, different. They all have the same goal. Just come from different lines of approach, and atheism seems to be the bigger part because we have all been going to school when we were children, and probably we were indoctrinated not into Islam but into atheism, and now we're seeing the consequences of it.
Yeah, we've lost touch with our moral underpinnings, which is Christianity, which underpins our legal system, the beliefs that underpin our legal system, and our rationality, our morality. And of course, as you lose touch with that, I mean, when we look at how atheism became the new atheism, and the new atheism turned into a complete farce, and then of course, you know, that just spawned lots of crazy wokeness. And of course, these rational scientific atheists are the ones telling you that men with winkies can get babies. I mean, I don't know how that works, but But yeah, I mean, maybe we can take 100 men with winkies, put them on an island for 10 years and see how many babies come out. I don't know. Maybe they can show us. But yeah, so atheism has become utterly irrational, but throughout history, atheism has always been completely irrational. It has always been totalitarian. It has always been an ally of socialism. And it has always been very much oppressive, murderous, violent, and is an integral part of the 20th century, which was the most violent century in human history. So yeah, everyone's back together. Welcome, Just Janice. Yep. So guys, by the way, tomorrow I should be on with Usama, and we're gonna have Hatun Tash, and we're gonna talk about how she discovered 26 different Qurans. We now know there are even more, but she discovered the 26 different Qurans. That was, I think, summer of 2016. I think it's August 2016 that happened, and that's going to be a very interesting discussion. So guys, where do we go next? What's next on this topic?
Well, should we have a look at the slides that you have, which tell a little bit about the story, and then we talk about our thoughts on basically how that has led into the mess that we are experiencing, particularly the UK.
Okay, yep, sounds like a plan. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show then the summary slides. Guys, exactly the same slides exactly the same notes that I'm going to show you here are available to you as a PDF in the download, to download in the chat. You'll see it pinned, so please download it. And then also these are derived from multiple of my PowerPoints from all the shows, so I merged a whole bunch of them. So yeah, I don't want to go through like 4 or 5 different PowerPoints, so we'll do this and I'll refer to those PowerPoints as needed. So okay, so atheism. Now, atheists, modern atheists, frequently want to define their views, right, in a very particular, very personal manner. So they'll say, for instance, major academic sources, which includes the gold standard, the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, things like the Cambridge Dictionary of Philosophy and the Rutledge Encyclopedia of Philosophy, all. And I have a source where I go through about 85 different major academic sources which define and discuss atheism from the top atheist academics in the world. And they all define atheism as a proposition or a doctrinal position, a set of beliefs, a belief system, asserting that God does not exist, right? It is a belief system asserting that God does not exist. Now, philosophers obviously prefer this metaphysical position because a proposition can be argued as true or false, whereas modern atheists want to claim it's a mere psychological state, a state of a lack of belief. In other words, a state of ignorance. Babies have a lack of belief in whiskey, for instance, which, yeah, ignorance is not a state of knowledge, but I thought atheists claim that they have a scientific position of knowledge. But now apparently they've just got the black hole, an empty space, complete lack of actual knowledge, which we're supposed to now respect. So yeah. So guys, your thoughts on that before we continue? Besides, a psychological state cannot be true or false. A psychological state is a bunch of feelings, and feelings cannot be a true or false logical proposition. It's just, I feel like whatever, feelings woke. There you go. That's atheism. What do you think, guys?
Can I just ask then, when you're looking at the Cambridge, the Routledge, and the Stanford, how many years ago was their definition written?
Well, in the set of slides that I have, let me just bring this up actually.
Because for me personally, I think that may be how it would sound like the definition came about decades ago.
Oh no, certainly. Let me bring up. Yeah.
So the scientific predicate now would not be a state of mind. The scientific predicate now will be the doctrine of evolution as taught in school. That would, because whenever you talk to an atheist, their default position is some version of evolution as the predicate towards their atheism.
Well, look, these are all yeah. Well,
so that goes into.
Let's redefine that before we get into evolution as a whole separate stream, right, of ideas. What is the opposite of theism? What is the opposite? Now, theism let's assume theism is Christianity for our purpose here. Theism is then Christianity, which is a fully formed belief system with a set of very clear beliefs, right? Now, but what is the opposite of theism? Apparently, according to atheists, it's not atheism. So what is,
If theism is some form of Christianity, then logic would dictate something that's contrary to Christianity would be antichrist or anti-Christian.
Right.
So that's what my default position in the way that you're describing
it. And if theism, and then if we look at theism, right, something has to have an opposite. And of course, the thing always comes before its opposite, right? So if we have theism, then what is the opposite of theism? And of course, atheists are going to go a complete lack of, that's right. What is theism's contradictory? Well, obviously atheism, but atheists want to claim that they don't have any beliefs whatsoever.
Yep, that's very true. I'll say that the definition there where it says against God, that is the best explanation I've seen for it, because atheism is, look, everything in the universe has an explanation, is a scientific explanation, and the only one statement is not God. We don't know what it is. If there is something we haven't explained yet, don't worry, give us time, and we will figure it out. But it is 100% not God. That is actually what the whole premise of atheism. Either we have figured it out, or when we do, you will see how it is not God.
Yeah. How is a lack of knowledge? How is an absence of knowledge? How is a state of ignorance, just an absolute lack of belief, a knowledge claim? How is it something you can build? And then why would we have such detailed philosophical volumes that discuss atheist belief if it's just a simple lack of belief? So no, it's a doctrinal position, and they simply want to try to relieve themselves of the burden of coherent proof. Does that make sense, guys?
Yes.
Yeah, so exactly. This is fantastic. Cross and Crescent says, do you want to join us? Do you want to come online? Please join us, Eric, if you'd love to. Let me drop the link in the chat. Please join us. So Gnostic becomes agnostic. Placing the A in front of word makes it the opposite. So the opposite of theism is atheism. Exactly. Thank you. So I've just dropped the link in the chat. If you want to join us, please join us. Yeah, any thoughts, guys, on this?
No.
Yeah, well, to me, it makes like perfect sense. And when you're saying they're making the statement or the claim from ignorance, from void, atheism is very good at that, at saying we don't have the answers, but the programming that underlies the whole belief system is not God. It's going to be something, and our scientists are working on it. Unfortunately, what we see is that the more we investigate and we study science, the less we understand the whole thing, which is quite cool.
Right. Yeah. So, so atheism is not a mere lack of belief, right? In standard philosophy, a simple ignorance or indifference to theological matters does not qualify an adult as an atheist, because even if you go to the history of the early atheists, you had to actively challenge, negate, contradict, and provide an alternative, an opposite to theism. You had to challenge theism as false. It is the belief that your beliefs are true versus versus theism being false. But if you just have ignorance, well, then you're just ignorant. And here's another problem. If I tell you, if you didn't know about something, and now you learn about it, you are told about it, right? You can no longer claim a lack of belief. It is not possible because now you're aware of it. Now you have to make a choice. And therefore you are choosing actively to reject that thing. You are in denial at the very least. Your thoughts on that, guys?
Well, I would have a question. Like historically, am I right in thinking that everybody in history has always believed in superior deities, either one god or multiple gods? If you went back 1,000 years, people will tell you, I'm a Christian or I'm a Muslim, or I'm this, or this. So the concept of atheism in history didn't really have a place. People believed in something extraordinary or supernatural. So, do you know when this term was first coined and started to have a group of people saying, no, we don't believe in anything, everything is nature?
I mean, this all started, without getting too complex, you can trace it back to ancient Greeks, but these Greeks were at the very least irrational. When you look at what they believed, if you look at the beliefs they held, I mean, these people were completely irrational. So the ideas go back to the ancient Greeks, and these are actually pagan ideas. So atheism is really just a modern refresh on ancient pagan ideas.
Is it not true to say, though, that when you look at the roots of Greeks and atheism, what they were actually doing, they were arguing against the case of how the Greeks understood theology, because I was looking at it from the Greek and the Roman, the Greeks and the Roman perspective of the gods that they had, the pantheon of gods, and the fleshly traits that those gods had. So they were challenging the gods that were in existence at that particular time of their existence when they were writing their atheist points of view as well, or challenging theism. What they did not realize, and I understand this if I understand it correctly from John Lennox and his book, God and Stephen Hawking, was that the Hebrew scriptures did exactly the same thing by challenging the gods of the Greeks and the surrounding nations. All the Greeks did is eliminate the Hebrew God's rationale and incorporated it as their own rationale and projected almost like a plagiarism to project their atheism rather than the position of the Hebrew God against the pantheon of gods as there was in the Greeks, and then what later on became the pantheon of gods for the Romans.
Right. Yeah, I don't remember too much about all the notes because I've got several hundred slides. So hello, Freddie and Ower, welcome. Romans even called Christians as atheists because they rejected the Roman gods. It's always been that atheist meant the ones that regret the gods or reject the gods. Right. Now
that's the point. That's the point. It was the rejection of the Greek and the Roman gods, which was predicated on the Hebrew scriptures, but the Greeks didn't use the Hebrew scriptures in their attack on the Roman and Greek gods of that time.
Right. Yeah. Now also historical lexicography. So historically, dictionaries have defined atheism as a positive denial. Now, in the PDF that I showed you, which is on the show, one of the shows I've done, Atheos, I have about 85 definitions taken from the top academic sources used worldwide, right, going back hundreds of years into the founding of modern atheism, right? And for instance, atheism has always been defined as a positive denial or disbelief, an active disbelief, a rejection of God. So Diderot, under Allenber's Encyclopédie, stated that to be charged with atheism, one must have the notion of God and reject it. You look at Samuel Johnson's dictionary in 1755, defined it as the disbelief of a God. And the online etymology dictionary traces the prefix "a" to the Greek negation, meaning not, rather than an absence. It's not an absence. It's not a psychological state. If you just have a psychological state, you may as well claim you're running on feelings and you are woke. And we know where that's getting us today.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah, so historical roots and political nature of atheism. So any thoughts from the audience, please put your thoughts in the chat and we can discuss them as well. So modern atheism did not originate from objective scientific inquiry, but it was a socio-political reaction against established authorities. For instance, there was political rebellion. Pre-Enlightenment, science was not the motivator for atheism. Modern European atheism developed as a rebellion against established political and social orders, like the monarchy and the church, and these were theologically legitimized. So to deny God was to deny the king, the state, and all the traditional ties regulating society. And now that we, of course, are loosening and unbinding all the ties that bind us as a society, we see society falling apart, where atheists have secularized the UK, for instance. You're seeing the rise of everything that is, shall we say, unsavory in the world. You see it in the US. You see morals change. For instance, you know what's been crazy? This whole idea, this guy that was stabbed, Austin Metcalf, that was stabbed by a certain gentleman of color, and he only used a small knife, and he only stabbed him once. So therefore, he is innocent. You know, it's a first offense. He only killed one person, and he only killed them once, and he only killed them with a small knife, and it's a first offense. You know, so I mean, Black women have 5 sons, and now that a man has been sentenced to prison for murder, for murdering someone, for stabbing them in the heart, Black women everywhere are thinking, what do we tell our sons? What are we going to do? I mean, this is a travesty of justice. Someone's been sent to jail for murdering someone with a small knife. I mean, this is exactly the crazy position that we're in today, because people have lost sight of religious education, moral grounding that would have, unfortunately, but now you can see this is all very much self-serving philosophy that wants to legitimize murder. What do you guys think?
Well, you said actually a very key word in there, which is religious education. I remember when I was in primary school and high school and all of those things, that everyone's favorite class was religious education, because nothing happened. We just got to play. Everybody got then top marks. I don't even remember having exams. There was nothing being taught, because the teachers, they were secular teachers. They were there normally for a year or two only in the school, and they would sit down and say, do whatever you want to do. The only things that I knew about anything to do with religion was getting to Christmas and watching the 10 Commandments or a movie like this on TV. So there was no education at all about religion. And it's because obviously the teachers, they already didn't believe in any of it. So now thinking back, it feels incredibly weird that we would have an actual class that is meant to be devoted to religion, which, it could have been just teaching religions of the world, for example, to say, look, so this country has been founded in this belief system, and look, there is this other belief system and this other religion. No, there was basically no class. It was a free hour.
Right. Well, don't forget, the UK does teach religions of the world, which involves visiting a mosque and praying to Allah. Whereas it does not involve going to Hindu temples, it does not involve going to any churches, but it does involve going to mosques. Your thoughts on that, Thunderous?
I was just thinking to myself there that one has to be careful in schools when they're talking religious education now, because it's not religious education anymore, it's Islamic education. We don't have religious education anymore where you would understand the tenets of the Bible, maybe have morning assembly and such things. As you was talking there about the influences of how society was, I mean, whatever version of Christianity was in Europe at the time, Catholicism, Protestantism, and the various other smaller churches, there was a common denominator in as much that there were certain objective theistic moral values that held repugnant things, or the things that God hated, at bay. It served as a bulwark. But as that bulwark has eroded, seeps inside the things that God hates, because atheism has created a vacuum, so there's no objective value anymore. Everything is just now subjective feelings. An example of this would be, for those that are, say, over the age of 45 and lived in England, would be how language has changed. I mean, we used to use phrases in this country up until about the mid-80s called, like, you're wearing your Sunday best, meaning you were dressed up in smart attire because you're on your way to church, your Sunday best clothing. And then you'd have things like, a child born outside of wedlock was a bastard. It was used as a pejorative because of the illegal roots, as it were, from God's point of view, that have how a child came about. You would also have things like living in sin. Two people living together, not married, was something that was frowned upon in society, living in sin. So there are various phrases that all, that served as a testimony as to how objectively held together the community was. Atheism has eroded all of those values incrementally as time has moved forward. And the byproduct of that, I mean, you just mentioned a moment ago, Lloyd, about a black woman with 5 children, but it's not a black woman with 5 children anymore. It's a black woman with 5 children and likely 4 different fathers that have fathered the 5 children. That's where we are now, you know. So gone now, the stigma of having a child outside of wedlock or having a child that's a bastard is no longer seen or frowned on by society. It's now celebrated rather than scorned. So you can now see that are women and men as well that may have upwards of 2 or 3 or 4 children, or a woman can have 2 or 3 or 4 children fathered by 2 or 3 different men, and you can have a man that has 2 or 3 children mothered by 2 or 3 different mothers. That's right. The state of it. And the education system has recognized this, because now you're finding that the education system in the United Kingdom is appealing to men to consider going into education, particularly at primary and middle school level, so that they can primarily serve as a surrogate father, someone that the child could look to as a role model, as an act of respect, because the child likely does not have a man at home that he can look up to as a father figure. And this is where the gangs come in. So when you consider the Americas in, say, the
fatherless children require stability. They need some kind of guidance, and they form gangs to create that.
Yes, the gang becomes a surrogate father.
But also, you know, back in the 80s, a term became popularized: love child. You spoke of the corruption of language. So instead of calling a child a bastard or someone who had no father, it became a love child. So,
but it's even worse than that now, Lloyd. I would argue it's even worse than that, because within certain cultures or certain demographics, she's not even the child's not even the love child anymore. It's just a child from baby mama. And they can't even use the name of the mother of their own child. They have to use terminologies like baby mama, and the baby mama is not even used anymore. They use the term BM, so she's not even a baby mother; she's just a BM now, reducing the role of the
devaluing of everything that is sacred.
Yeah, so she's now just an incubator,
right?
I mean, this is what atheism has done to society. And then there's the byproduct of breaking up the family and redefining what a family is. When you go to the biblical narrative, it is one man, one woman. Adam made the claim or the poem in the book of Genesis when it says, this is why a man will leave his mother and father, stick to his wife, and the two must become one flesh. Jesus repeats that. So therefore, giving you what the standard of marriage is: one man, one woman, having children. But now, under atheism, a marriage can be defined by whatever you consider a marriage to be. You can have 3 men, as in the case of Canada, where 3 men were in a polyamorous relationship and they wanted to adopt a little girl, which is incidentally what did take place.
Fatherlessness is one of the greatest indicators of someone growing up to be a criminal and spending time in prison. But also, if you look at the Fabian Society, they were made up of a number of sexual degenerates who were all part of the Fellowship of the New Life. And the Fellowship of the New Life had all sorts of interesting, and of course, the members of the Fabian Society, they were effectively one and the same organization, because these people were supposedly had a new set of morals, and they were going to perfect themselves and perfect the world through their beliefs. Lots of them were gay or some kind of strange sexual practice, odd sexual practices. But of course, if you look at all of the gayness that they were spreading, they were claiming that gay people are superior because they're not distracted by children. But if you look at it, parents have children and they take responsibility. They think about the future of their kids. So they try to build a world where they conserve things, where things move forward with stability. But if you look at the whole emptiness of these people who are childless in that sense, they are simply just chasing orgasms, because there's no plan to have children, or there's not even the ability to do so. And then they end up predating on others' children. So you're changing the morality. The whole fabric of society changes. I mean, there's plenty of these videos going around. I've seen one recently, 2 weeks ago, where you had a bunch of gays in San Francisco saying, "We're coming for your children." I mean, they're still at it. So there's an element here of,
and And what you're saying there, Lloyd, is they go at it in a very insidious way, because they go at it using certain monikers like diversity, equity, and inclusivity. For instance, drag queen story time. So they're having grown men dressed in sexually provocative clothing, going into primary schools and libraries, having children in their laps, sexualizing children. So the objective theistic moral values, not even Islam will tolerate that, and certainly the Bible wouldn't.
Yeah,
but atheism allows us, and they call it liberation.
When I was a kid at school, at primary school, they introduced sex education, and you had to be 12 or older, I believe it was, to go to sex ed classes. But now sex ed has trickled down even down to kindergarten, and you're literally getting pornographic children's textbooks which talk about boys, young boys, because it's taught to children who are very young, talking less than 10, very young children, sucking on the winkies of other boys, and lubing their butts because they might need to bend over for the other boy. And you're like, how did this come about? Now, I'll tell you this much. It's not the Muslims doing this, and it's not the Christians doing this. It's the atheists doing this. So now you've got this. So you've got an ideology that is antithetical to morality, because these people don't believe in a future. They don't believe in punishment. They don't believe in paradise, and therefore they just are hedonistic and want to get what they can now. Any thoughts from you, Jesse? You've been quiet for a while.
Yeah, actually, with the other day, probably a couple of weeks ago, I saw a YouTuber, a lady who had a baby, and she said how her life had changed from before. She said before she had a baby, she was defund the police and all of this very liberal stuff. And she says, now I have a kid. Now I don't want to have homeless people around. I don't want to have my neighborhood with a lot of foreigners. Now I want more police. But before I was in those rallies going, defund the police. So it's the change that happens when there is a young generation that you need to provide for, that you need to protect. That's the first thing that they actually removed. There was a movie, I can't remember if it's called Children of Men, I think, something like that, from years ago, on a world where people cannot have kids anymore. There are no children. And I think it's 20 or 30 years later, the whole thing is in chaos. People are no longer merciful. They are not kind. Everything is like civil war. Everyone looks at their young, and then they try to do things to make them be in a better position. And that's something that they have removed over the last couple of generations. When we saw the whole thing with abortion and these topics, which is a whole different topic, of course. But first, they start with, let's let everyone do whatever they want. So, and then it went from that to, actually, we don't have enough people in the country. Let's actually bring people from the third world. So by their fruits, you shall know them. If that was a good policy, very liberal, and it works for the world, you wouldn't have had to be in a position where now we don't have enough people. Now we need to import people who are not compatible with our culture. So you can see by how everything has developed over the last 2 generations.
Yeah. By the way, Sandro mentioned here, this is the entrance to the BBC, right? This little statue was at the. Yeah, that's fascinating. And as you know, the BBC has a reputation, shall we say?
Yeah, and the thing is, it's the guy that actually did this as well, that did the sculpture. I think he also had intimate relations with his own daughters. That's the reason why there's more significance, rather than just the sculpture. It's the man who did the sculpture that needs to be investigated as well. From what I remember, and I stand to be corrected, he has quite a debauched history with his members of his own family.
That is just crazy. That is just sad. So,
but that sets the example for the BBC, though, eh?
I mean, the BBC has a long history of, shall we say, presenters that are of questionable morality, let's just say, and the reporting on issues of this type is suspect.
Can I just comment on what the Villainous is saying? Just Villainous. So just you've made a comment in there. Is the Muslim world really worried about the sexual indoctrination of children? I would say the majority of, because we're all made in God's image, so I would say that the majority of the Muslim world are concerned about these things. But then that's because most of them are living in ignorance as to what they understand about Muhammad and his relationship with Aisha as well. So, which is why they have a lot of confidence.
But I'm going to play this for a second. I'm just going to zoom in here. And this was on X. And I asked what in the zut is going on here. This is an Islamic party, shall we say. I don't know if it looks... Now, these are all men here, just so you know. These are all men. And I'm going to play this. I'm going to turn down the volume just so you guys can see what's going on here. These are men. There are no women here.
Bachabazi.
Yep. So yeah. Just so there's some odd things going on in the Islamic world that we need to ask about. Wow, Muslim sects don't consider boys under 13 as men. Having relations is not considered homosexuality. There's a lot of abuse in Islam. Yeah, there's lots of interesting reasons, but yeah. So there's a couple of odd things going on in Islam. Should we move to the next topic?
Yeah.
Yeah, the spirit of Zut is very strong in that one. Yeah, I've seen worse videos than that, man. I've seen some. Yeah. Okay, so humanism and atheism, few people realize, but humanism and atheism are classified as religions. They claim to be replacements to alternatives to superior alternatives to religion, but they actually are classified as religions. And in fact, atheists went to court. They went as high as the Supreme Court to make sure that the law accepted atheism as a religion. So one of the themes in the documents is that secular humanism and scientific atheism functionally and legally do operate as religions. Yeah, Numos makes a good point here. So, for instance, Ludwig Feuerbach deeply influenced Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, and he wrote, "What yesterday was still religion is no longer such today, and what today is atheism, tomorrow will be religion." So he asserted that human nature itself was the true secret and essence of religion, that you become God. You find that you are God.
Do what thou will. So that will be something that we were discussing a couple of weeks ago with reference to Aleister Crowley.
Yep. And that would be, then you have Julian Huxley. He openly advocated for, and these are just a few examples. I have dozens of these examples of the founders of modern atheism in Europe and the US, new religion based on evolutionary humanism. And this would redefine divinity and create a secular equivalent to the Christian state of salvation. And that equivalent would be therapy. Therapy is very popular in the US. You'll see ads on YouTube for therapy services. And so we don't do confession. We don't confess our sins. We now go to therapy to wash away our memories rather than cleanse ourselves of our sins. And then John Dewey, he's termed the father of American education. He describes humanism as a common faith. And this faith needed to be made explicit, and it needed to be militant, it needed to be aggressive. And he spoke of the teachers in schools as the priests who were forcibly indoctrinating children into the humanist religion, the humanist atheist religion. Then Charles Francis Potter, he founded the first humanist church in New York, and you can even find an atheist Bible that used to be around. And he explicitly called humanism a religion. So it was a modern religion, a scientific religion. Then, I'll pause here. What do you guys think of that so far?
Well, that's exactly what, when I look at things like that and I read articles like that, the first thing that comes to my mind is Genesis chapter 3, verses 1 to 5, where Satan had Eve turn around and said to Eve, you can become your own God. You don't need to listen to the God that created you to tell you what's right and wrong. You yourself determine what's right and wrong for yourself. Genesis 3, 1 to 5.
Right. That's a fantastic point. That's a very good catch, Thunderous. That is really good. Exactly. You start to listen to your own feelings. Your own, you make yourself the arbiter of right and wrong. And then of course you start to serve your own agenda. And boom, you've got Gnostics, and you've got and then you've got these totalitarian ideologies. MA552 says therapy is built on Carl Jung's consciousness model, and he's a Gnostic. Yeah, he was a crazy Gnostic. He wasn't just a Gnostic, he's more like an occultist. The guy believed that he had a spirit guide or an alien from beyond the planes of existence that was guiding him and talking to him, and he would talk to his alien in the garden, or talk to his guiding spirit in the garden. Now, if I did that, yeah. Anyway, back in the day, we would consider that to be slightly abnormal and rather crazy, but now it would probably just be considered the average Democrat.
Actually, that actually sounded like he needed to go to therapy.
Exactly. Yeah, that is pretty crazy. And the US Supreme Court, very few people know that in 1961, in a case called Torcaso versus Watkins, the US Supreme Court ruled, this is not the only court case, but we'll take the Supreme Court one, that theistic religions could not be legally favored over non-theistic ones. And in footnote number 11 of the ruling, Justice Hugo Black listed secular humanism, and he mentions atheism, alongside Buddhism and ethical culture. Ethical culture is just humanism under a new hat, as religions in the United States that do not teach a belief in the existence of God. But even atheism specifically was labeled as a religion. So atheism is a religion for all intents and purposes. Atheists argued until the 1980s, when it was an embarrassing position because they wanted to claim it was scientific and not religious. And then it's like, oops, yeah, let's pretend we never did that. And then they remarketed atheism as a scientific position. There's nothing scientific about it. Yeah. Any thoughts, guys, on that?
No comment.
Yeah, I'd say something that as well that I have noticed is that somehow we have gone from everybody or most people believing in God to atheism. And then after that, we've had people appearing saying, well, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. So there is something out there is something grand, but it is not the religion. Religion is, yes, what humans have created to try to explain that, but I can figure it out on my own because I'm that clever. So things have gone in a very weird way of first saying, no, there is no God, to, well, there is certainly something else, and I can actually get there on my own. It feels silly. I think in human history, if you were to the church and said, look, I don't trust you guys, but I think there is something, I think I can figure it out, they will not know what you're talking about because you don't have any foundations. So it's kind of like a weird thing.
I think it's religion on their own terms, in my estimation. When people turn around and say, well, I don't have a religion, but I believe there's something out there. It's almost like they, as human beings, we're made in God's image. So we have sort of like a spiritual dimension to our personality. There's a need of wanting to have something above us that we can look to, that guides us, protects us, loves us, so on and so forth, and gives us the answers to the curiosity that we have in our mind. Some human beings would just turn around and say, rather than deny organized religion as something that they hold in contempt, it's basically an excuse for them to say, well, I believe there's something out there, but I want it on my own terms.
Right. I actually want to find the stuff on Jung. Yeah, hold on, let me see. Maybe this will be it. So dark influences were present in the careers of the two most influential pioneers of psychology, right? You have Jung and Sigmund Freud, and Jung's ideas were heavily influenced by popular German cults, right? So it is from discussions with Philemon, that is Jung's spirit guide, that Jung received his most profound insights about the nature of the human psyche. I mean, what if Jung was talking to Satan? Heck, I don't know. What if he was talking to the angel gibberish, the same one that spoke to Muhammad in the cave, right? So Freud also had an unconscious hostility to the faith, right? And this was because of his preoccupation with the devil, damnation, and the Antichrist. And Fitz, who's one of his biographers, even asked if Freud had made a pact with the devil. And of course, Darwin, Darwin was, of course, very much anti-Christian, and he was an atheist. He was plagued by, in his own words, vomiting, shivering, dying sensations, ringing in his ears, heart palpitations, blurred visions, hysterical crying fits. And so he was a very disturbed individual. But of course, we're not supposed to question any of that because these are perfectly balanced people. But once you look into their actual psychology, these people are messed up and nobody should be taking any advice from them. But they get painted to us as this wonderful picture when actually these are very, very disturbed people. And
have you noticed it?
Yeah, sorry, go on.
So, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, Lord, but have you noticed something in their date of birth? All these human beings and all the influences, like the books that they've written, which have shaped society today, something that I made a point of several weeks ago, that they all come about in one moment in history, round about the same sort of time, all writing with a one end game agenda. Attack the God of the Bible, attack the Bible, undermine the faith of those who were observing the narrative of the Bible. It goes back to what your discussion was talking about with Aleister Crowley. He was born around that sort of time. It goes back to the Fabian Society. It goes back to the origin of the species. It goes back to studies in geology. It goes back to eugenics. It goes back to people like Margaret Sanger. She was born around this sort of time. Albert Kinsey. All of these human beings that have shaped the society that we have today, they were either born or their writings come around this particular period of time. Isn't that interesting?
Yep. Yeah, I don't think it's a coincidence. I mean, so yeah, he had this force which was not himself. He held conversations in his fantasies. And it was this being that spoke to him like, yeah, thanks, Jung. Maybe you need to get yourself checked in to a mental hospital. Yeah, Freud summarized, you desire your mom, you desire your father, and you're gay. Freud summarized. Yeah, pretty much.
And do a lot of coke as well, because Freud loved doing coke.
Yeah. You know what's interesting? Darwinism as religion. It's actually interesting. That's by Michael Ruse. So Darwinian theory served as a rival to the Christian worldview from the mid-Victorian period. So yeah, you had just all of this, this religious stuff going on. And so guys, I guess, I mean, what are we deriving from this so far? In that you've got a simple, coherent, moral worldview, which is rooted in biology. They are men and they are women. And we are created to complement each other. We're here to perpetuate the human race. We're here to serve God. We are not ourselves to be God, but we are to be subservient to a higher moral, natural law. Atheism destroyed these ideas. The woke are trying to teach you there's 9 million genders. Somehow, archaeologists can only identify 2 types of skeletons, male and female, oddly enough, but apparently these people can identify 9 million different genders. Not sure how they can do that, but they're trying to pretend that your men and women are divorced. The idea of a man and the idea of a woman is divorced from biology, so that there's no objective foundation for what we see in the world. That everything is purely based in imagination, just like Jung's spirit guide that taught him psychology and explained to him how humans work. I think Jung needs to be thrown in the garbage for that kind of set of ideas. So yeah, but atheism is a what would you call it? Something that unbinds the glue that has bound us together for thousands of years, because all the ideas that we built Western civilization on, these are the good ideas that ultimately we've discovered work. But once you give up those ideas, all of the problems that those ideas solve all come back. We're going back towards Sodom and Gomorrah. If you look at what happened at the White House just 2 years ago, with all the gays, the trannies, exposing their breasts and sex in all sorts of odd places, and where the laws are made in the US, gay sex videos and all that. You look at that, this is all the kind of thing that's described in the Bible as the debauchery and degeneracy that God detests. Right.
I would argue we're in a worse state, Lloyd, than what they were in Sodom and Gomorrah, because to a certain extent, not just in behavioral practices, but geographically as well, because Sodom and Gomorrah was located in one area, What we're talking about now is worldwide. You know, it's in every secular land in the world, and other countries where these sort of things are said to not exist, they happen in isolated pockets anyway. You've just given a demonstration with your videos of what takes place in Afghanistan with the Butcherbazi. So these things do take place. I think it's on a bigger scale, and well, it certainly is on a bigger scale, but I think what's taking place is a lot worse, because there are other things that you can throw into the mix as well. So it's not just about the sexual perversions that are taking place today. I would counter argue as well, you can add on in there things like abortion and state-assisted suicide. Those sort of things add up to the
it's anti-life. I mean, yes. These days the abortion was supposed to be safe and rare, right? Remember those claims were made back in the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s. Safe, something, and rare. I can't remember what it was. Let me just find it quickly. What was the claim? Abortion was to be safe, legal, and rare, right? Abortion was supposed to be safe, legal, and rare. Now, everyone wants to sing their abortion, shout their abortion, write poems about their abortion, deliberately have kids so they can have abortions. You have people videoing their abortions. It's incredibly crazy. And these are people that are deliberately wanting to do these things that are anti-human, anti-life, that are everything that we believe is moral, because they're doing it not because they're trying to bring something better into the world, because they want to destroy what we are. And this is when the God of the Bible says, I mean, in the book of Psalms, David says, "You saw the embryo of me." And we understand how important life is to God. First of all, God describes the gift of life. Second of all, he sacrificed his own son so that we can gain life and get out of this state that we're in order to. So he gave the best that he got. God couldn't do any more than he did and sacrifice his own son. So he's demonstrating how he values human life. And yet you find people who think that abortion for trivial reasons. I think one of the singers that we had in this country was Lily Allen, where she's talking in a podcast how she's had 3 or 4 abortions, and she's speaking about it in a very casual manner, like it means nothing. And I've got an article that was written where an American psychologist has likened abortion to being no different than child sacrifices of the past, when people were sacrificing gods like Molech or the gods of Dagon and such. Because what they're doing, even if it's for a career, as an example, I'm going to get rid of the child because of a career. Well, you've sacrificed the child to yourself then in order for you to perpetuate your life. So at the cost of the child that you were going to give birth to. And I've just sent you a link, or 3 links rather, to state-assisted suicide, where in Belgium they suicided a girl just because of PTSD. She was only in her 20s. Spain, only 10 weeks ago, state-assisted suicided a girl because she got gang raped and she threw herself out of a building, ended up paraplegic, but she was only in her 20s. And in Canada, you can now get state-assisted suicide for just being homeless. Yeah,
this is the value atheism puts on life. This is the value humanists put on life.
The Nazis were considered evil, and we went to war because, as part of the ideology, they were doing this kind of thing. It was considered evil, reprehensible, and they needed to be stopped. And now, several countries around the world, Western countries, are making this law. What the Nazis were vilified for is now just Tuesday in Canada.
Yeah.
It is crazy. By the way, just before I go on, Mulhid al-Islam corrected me. He said, I'm wrong, as always. There are more than one gender. There's male, female, email, black male. You're right. I was wrong. There's at least 4 genders: male, female, email, and black male. And in fact, I think scientifically they are men, women, and Canadians. Okay, so I'll try and remember this in the future. Okay. So, JC, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, well, with the whole, it's like I said before, you can see when they propose a policy and say, hey, look, this is going to be amazing. This is going to be, we are so enlightened. This is going to be the future. And then now we are 20, 30, 40 years after that decision, and we see that things did not work out. Quite the opposite. A lot of bad things are happening. So you can tell when someone is lying to you, if not immediately, it will happen later. Just going back to this psychologists. So in the world of atheism, psychologists are meant to be the best of the best. They are like the priests of the atheist world, because you have a problem, you go to them. They help you explore your past, your memories, and they are meant to be there to help you explore your belief system. They are not there to affirm them. But what have we seen over the last probably 20 years, in the US particularly? People going to psychologists and just being basically being a drugstore. They go in there just to actually get drugs, and then they are very much damaged by that experience. And the second one, instead of helping people explore their, say, gender concerns to affirm what has happened, and now all of this is now a huge problem, like these people should be sent to prison. So if they are supposed to be the enlightened ones, the ones that can help bring society to this new utopia of we are all so great, we would not be seeing the things that we are saying.
Right. So the humanist deception, something I need to raise here. These are very brief summaries of very detailed discussions that I've done in the past. But a humanist writer called Tom Flynn in 1985 outlined a very pragmatic strategy for humanists to publicly deny being a religion, because they'd been a religion now for decades. They'd said, we are a religion, we're a better religion than your religion. And then suddenly it's like, oops, we made a mistake. And they created a new marketing, a new PR campaign to state that they're not a religion, even though legally they are. They fought tooth and nail to be recognized as religions. The literature, their founders all claim that these atheist ideas are all religions. He said that if humanism is legally recognized as a religion, it is then subject to the same constitutional curbs, which is the separation of church and state that humanists use to restrict conventional churches. That is to deny Christian ideas, Christian practices within state services like schools. And if they are a religion, then they would be prevented from establishing their worldview in public school classrooms. They could then no longer indoctrinate freely by claiming not to be a religion, except that is a lie. In the US, at the very least, atheism is a religious practice. And thus they created this whole lie. And of course, atheists promote and buy into this lie probably through ignorance, but they are themselves victims of the Kool-Aid that they've drunk. But either way, they're still damaging the state. They're damaging Western culture. They're damaging Western morals. They are undermining Western society as we know it. Any thoughts on that, guys?
Yeah, I can actually bring this back to a similarity that it has with Islam. It becomes dogmatic. So in Islam, one of the problems that we're having here on your channel and mine is when we're saying, hey, the history of Islam is not what we've been told. Muslims don't engage because they take it as dogma that Muhammad existed, that everything happened in the Hijaz, that basically their hadiths are all correct, if convenient, of course. The same thing happens with atheism and humanism. It is dogmatic. They don't defend their beliefs. They simply attack. And I will say something about that later. But you will not see an atheist say, well, let me prove to you evolution or history or anything of the sort, or morality. They just cannot do it. They would go on the attack, and normally it would look something like, yes, but according to you, God destroyed the whole world. So how is that moral? They cannot defend their beliefs, so they just have to throw things. It's dogmatic, and they have zero interest on trying to prove their claims. Their only interest is to say, your claims are wrong, and you have to trust me, brother, I'm right.
Right. Chloe Cox asks you, what's the difference between religion and a cult? I don't think the question is really the question. The question is really an attempt to minimize the fact that atheism, we haven't even gotten to the part where atheism is actually incredibly violent and has been at the heart of and at the root of the most violent century in human history, the 20th century, and has undergirded all of these incredibly lethal beliefs, starting with, or not starting with, but certainly looking at the Nazis who believed in all of these atheist-derived ideas. Atheism has spawned lots of incredibly evil ideas. And of course, you have atheistic Satanism as well. So I think the whole point is to try to simply distract onto something else, to tie you up in knots on some other issue, and to minimize what we're talking about here, which is the evil of atheism. So,
Lloyd,
yeah.
before we move on, now that you mentioned this, do you have at hand that statistic, that calculation that you had about how many wars have been fought by basically different religions and then secular countries, by any chance?
Yes, I do. I need to find it. I have it somewhere. Yeah. Give me 1 sec. I'll get it for you. But we'll get to that. But actually, let me just find that. So data. Okay. So let me just skip forward. So for instance, just as an example, and remember, I have extensive multi-hours of analysis on this. Okay, sorry, Chloe, then I'm probably misunderstood you. I do apologize. It's very hard always to understand. A cult is usually insular. It's an intense devotion to a single charismatic leader or a highly secretive, manipulative group. Obviously, the idea of cult, I mean, the words change over time. Even Christianity was seen as a cult at one point, but typically cults have a negative connotation.
I think we've just recently seen that in Crewe, haven't we, the United Kingdom, where
Yes.
the cult was actually just broken up. And I think David Koresh will be another example. The Moonies
Yeah.
will be another example, so on and so forth, where the leader has the devotion that rightfully belongs to a god.
Yep, there was the so the religion of peace and light, the Ahmadi religion of peace and light. Let me just bring that up quickly. So these guys, I mean, these guys jumped onto the world stage recently. They were all over for a while. They were a big thing. And you had this guy, and it was a big thing for a while, this dude here. I'm just going to open the image. He claimed that he was Jesus Christ. He was Muhammad. He was the reincarnation of Jesus Christ, or whatever the heck. He was the new religion to replace all the other religions. He was the new Messiah. And of course, 500 police or something, or 200 police descended on their estate, arrested several of their members for sex trafficking, for all sorts of fun things that none of us are surprised at. Yeah, so you have this. By the way, so to answer your question, JC, if we go to the Encyclopedia of Wars by Axelrod and Phillips, right, they took, I think they had 8 very, very highly experienced military historians, and they went through 10,000 years of military history, right? Warfare, battles, fights. And what happened was, yeah, he was the new Mahdi, that's it. And according to the study, they studied 1,763 historical wars. Now, for instance, there were certain wars that were maybe 100 battles over a century or more. And instead of calling all those individual wars, they would just call it one war. And so there might be thousands of these things that have happened, but they decided to just lump them all under one war. 93% were categorized as secular government wars. Only approximately 7% were caused by religious conflict. And by religious conflict, they mean where you could claim a religious component, right? Islam accounted for more than half of all of that. Okay, Islamic aggression accounted for more than half of all religious conflict. That was 3.8%. And all other religions combined, only 3.2%. So we see there already in this major study done by experts that no, religion is not the major cause of war, as Sam Harris and others want to claim. So, yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say that even the most stupidly perverse or hopelessly ignorant person can look at the past 100 years, or even from World War I, not a religious war, World War II, not a religious war, Vietnam War, Korea War, Falklands War, First Gulf War, Second Gulf War, Afghan War, Libya, blah, blah, blah. The list goes on. They're not ideological wars. They're either capitalist wars, secular wars, or governmental wars. The other thing I wanted to comment on as well, because for those who have access to the Epstein files, I've been downloading documents from there. One of the interesting documents in the Epstein file list is if you type in Richard Dawkins, I think it may be on the 5th page of the downloads, you can actually download a seminar where they were looking into the genetic disposition of human beings and the propensity towards war and violence. So while these men, these vile men, have been blaming religion for the cause of war, they themselves knew all along religion is not the cause of war, it is the nature of man that's the cause of war. So these deceivers, these liars, these scum, have been blaming religion when they knew all along it's just the nature of man in his fallen state that's the cause of war. And you can download that from the Epstein files.
Yeah. So these guys studied from 8000 BC to the year 2000 AD, right? 93% of all wars are government and secular, Islam, and then all other religions. So Islam itself is just incredibly dangerous. And then, if you look at the 100 worst atrocities in history, right? The clown of reason, the clown prince of reason, Sam Harris, who claimed that religion is the most prolific source of violence in our history. And of course, he usually refers to Christianity in that respect. So in this study of the 100 worst atrocities in history, we find that only 11% are in the category of religious conflict, where there's a religious component. And 2 of these are under the category of human sacrifice, meaning the Aztecs, right? They're referring to the Aztecs who would slaughter 2,000 people in a day on their pyramid. And that's not exactly Christianity. So yeah. So 13% of the total, if you want to be generous, can be ascribed to religious. But this human sacrifice stuff, these are the Aztecs, the Olmecs, the Toltecs, and all that from South America. So yeah, religious conflict. And yeah, unfortunately, we're not seeing 99% of all wars are started by religion. So just to answer that question, JC, does that answer that question?
Yeah, thank you. And I think it's actually incredibly telling because before, as an atheist, if you had asked me what percentage of wars do you think would have been because of religion, I would have said like 99% would have been religious because that's how the world works, and mostly Christian. And that actually doesn't show the stats. So it is when you see this sort of information that you realize you have experts who should have been telling you exactly what happened, that you can trust them, that you realize that no, they are just pushing an agenda. There is something that they want to tell the public, and they are not based on science, even though you listen to them and it will think that they are 100% science-based and data-based, and that's not the case.
No, I mean, they're not. Yep.
I think what happens is just something about what JC is saying there is something that we all know and see, and we've all seen it many times with people like Zakir Naik. Zakir Naik gets on a platform like Ahmadiyya, makes a load of statements that are categorically wrong or outright lies, but the audience, because it matches their presupposition, they're going to believe it without any investigation. The atheist is no different. Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins probably know they are outright lying. I would go as far as to say, based on Romans 1:10, 1:20, they are knowingly outright lying. But they know their audience. They know their audience is not going to check the veracity of the statements that they are making, and they've seen that with human psychology in the past. Because Zakir Naik and Ahmadiyya are a demonstration that we already know. But by the time that the truth gets out, these men are already hidden in the background already. So out of, say, the 100% of atheists that this sort of rationale appeals to, maybe 2 or 3% will go and do some further investigation, and maybe they'll change their opinion on atheism. That's likely how it works, and that's why they get away with it.
Yeah, for the audience, atheism can be challenged. Atheism used to be a challenge. I remember listening to these arguments atheists used to make and being quite intimidated until I decided to take it all apart. And you realize it's a joke just like Islam. It's the same nonsense arguments. It's the same garbage. It's the same pseudo-intellectual gobbledygook. It's no different to,
Lloyd, we spoke about this years ago. I remember me and you discussing that if you look at Islam and atheism, both of them have only got one target in their sight. That's the biblical narrative. That's clear for anyone to see. But if you notice the rationale and the argument, their arguments are emotional, not logical. They claim to be scientific, but they're not scientific. They claim to be moral, but they are amoral. They claim to be appealing to logic and reason, but there is no logical reason in the rationale they're providing as a counter argument to the biblical narrative. It's exactly the same for both of them, but the foundation that they're coming with is totally different. One's coming with a vile, evil God that can be only described as demonic, and the other one is a godless point of view, but in itself has demonic origins.
Yeah. You know what really frustrated me was, I think when I discovered that atheists claim that they are pushing scientific atheism, that their ideas are scientific. No, this is scientific atheism. Our foundation is scientific. And then I discovered that the most murderous ideology of the 20th century, the communists, the socialists, were also scientific atheists. In fact, Marx was a scientific atheist. So you had Soviet scientific atheism as one example under the USSR. Scientific atheism was legally promoted as the official worldview to replace traditional Christian religion. And it functioned as a pseudo-religion, complete with an absolute moral code of conduct, regular meetings, and they had the League of Militant Atheists. In other words, like the League of Militant Muslims. I wonder what... Yeah,
that's an interesting statement. The absolute moral conduct. Who defines what is absolute?
Whatever serves the party, whatever serves the state, whatever serves the further promotion of the socialist state. Jihad is whatever serves the promotion of Islam, whatever pushes Islam forward and diminishes the infidel. So here it is whatever promotes socialist ideas and eliminates its opponents. It's jihad.
But if it's absolute, that means it cannot be updated or reconfigured. That's why it's absolute. Okay, if time moves forward and society changed, then you'd have to change the moral conduct to match the society and its proclivities at that time, because society and their worldview changes. So you would have to change the moral conduct or the moral code. We've seen that with atheism. Atheism has changed as time has moved forward as far as their moral outlook is concerned. 50 years ago, atheism didn't have 50 genders. Today, atheism has 50 genders. So time has allowed atheism to adapt to the worldview that it prevails in.
It's Gnostic. It adapts.
But who defines what the code is? And that's the problem, because if it can be updated, then the absolute doesn't end, does it?
Right.
It's valuable at any one given time to serve the purpose that it needs.
I mean, back to the idea of atrocities under atheism, right? Atheist rulers in the 20th century, looking at Stalin, Mao, Hitler, Lenin, Pol Pot, and others like them, they starved, they tortured, and they murdered upwards of 110 million people. That is in the space of maybe 60 years, right? And in fact, the true number is calculated at something like 200, as high as 280 million people, right? We don't know the exact number, right? Now, Mao Zedong is thought to have murdered something like 60 million of his own people in the pursuit of progress, in the name of atheist progress, right? And these are horrific crimes, mountains of bodies. They starved, they tortured, they murdered, they shot, they buried, right? And there were more people murdered just in a few decades of the 20th century than have been murdered, supposedly, in the name of religion in the prior 2,000 years. Yeah. So the numbers are astronomical. I'll give an example, right? There's an estimated... Now, people will claim that 50 million people died in the Crusades or some garbage like that. Man, there was something like maybe at that time less than 50 million people in all of Europe. So they want to claim that the Crusades literally wiped out everybody on the continent. But yeah, let's just say that's exaggerated. So there's roughly 1 million deaths estimated in the Crusades. And this is over 204 years. Okay. And we have maybe, let's be generous now, after all the exaggeration has passed, maybe 3,000 deaths in the Inquisitions, probably less than that, right? So you're having something like 8 fatalities a year, right? Over now the Inquisition ran for 400 years. You're looking at 6 to 8, 5, maybe 5 to 8 fatalities per year, right? That's one person who maybe died every 6 weeks, I don't know, 7 weeks. Whereas in World War I, 24,000 people a day were killed. 24,000 people a day. 35 million people died in 4 years versus 5 people a year over 400 years. I'd say there's a slight difference of scale here. So atheists were very, very murderous. Your thoughts on that, guys?
Well, you know what the atheist will say to that? The atheist will turn and say, well, that's not true atheism. That's not real atheism. Well, that's not my atheism. Isn't that the same as what Muslims say when there's an atrocity? That's not real Islam. That's not my Islam. That's not true Islam.
Yep.
Yeah,
Correct.
exactly the
Correct.
same. And during the Inquisition, fun fact, more people died by cows falling on them than by the actual Inquisition. So these are just things. This is a topic that what is his name? Raymond Ibrahim talks about a lot when people are given one part of history, but they actually ignore like 99% of what was going on. And obviously, he does this particularly in Islam when they say, oh, look what colonizers did. But they are actually ignoring everything else, that everybody was doing the same things and it was a lot worse in other places. All of that is ignored. So they give you information that is going to be in a vacuum that then controls you into thinking, oh my goodness me, my ancestors were horrible. It's like, no, your ancestors were probably peasants and they were being mistreated like everybody else because it was, difficult times. But the picture that atheists give you is a very different one. Is religion is the cause of all evil. Don't believe in God because atheism is great. And then you look at these numbers and say, if you want corpses, go atheist.
Yeah, I mean, I just checked now. The number of people killed by donkeys is about 1,200 a year. So if you work out, hang on, let's just work this out. Let's take 1,200 people a year by, let's say, I don't know, let's be generous, 8 people a year killed. So 150 times more people are killed by donkeys than were killed in the Inquisition, right, or in the Crusades. So donkeys are 150 times more deadly than the Inquisition or the Crusades. I think we need to ban donkeys now.
Yeah, or send them to prison. We ban donkeys. Let's just
ban donkeys. Let's ban donkeys. If we can ban X, we can ban donkeys. Someone call Keir Starmer right now to ban donkeys because donkeys are deadly. So yeah. And Sandra says the Inquisition killed 20 million people. Europe's population, 18 million. Exactly. It's exactly the nonsense that you hear.
I was wondering, are you going to ban me? Because I'm hung like a donkey. Does that count?
You know, Thunderous, this is a family-friendly show. I cannot believe you said that. Shame on you, Thunderous. Shame on you. Let us now get our minds out of the gutter and move forward and speak about the French Revolutionary Terror. So, the French Revolution is a case study, is a prime case study in atheist government. The French revolutionaries were all atheists and they were all socialists. This was the flowering of atheism and socialism in Europe. This was where the atheists, socialists were going to create a new form of governance, and they were going to they were going to de-Christianize France, and they were going to replace it with reason, with mankind's scientific reason as the pinnacle of human thought. And they ended up massacring people. There were rivers of blood. The atrocities that happened there are shocking. It would make the Nazis seem like amateurs by comparison. I've gone through this. The brutality of these people is just beyond words. So there were massive atrocities that the early French atheist state in its campaign of de-Christianization. These are just some of them. There's the thing called the September Massacres. Mobs slaughtered over 100 Catholic priests in a single prison for refusing to abandon Christianity. So atheists are going to say, well, people kill in the name of Christ. But yeah, these were atheists murdering in the name and the cause of atheism. Because atheists like to say that we don't have a belief, so therefore the belief couldn't kill anyone. Well, these were people who were claiming to be atheists, who were murdering people because they wouldn't convert to atheism. So they were killing for the purposes of bringing the atheist utopia about. So yes, people have murdered people in the cause of atheism. And thousands of priests were killed, as far as I know. The drownings at Nantes. So Jean-Baptiste Carrier executed up to 9,000 people, including priests and nuns and families. He would tie people together and then naked. He would strip them naked, tie them together, male and female, tie them together and throw them in the river from a boat. And yeah, he called these Republican marriages. He didn't like Republicans because obviously he was a freaking Democrat, and he sank them. Or he would tie them into boats and sink the boats. You had the Vendée genocide. I have no idea how to pronounce that. Historian Reynold Secher's research is very, very clear on this. The revolutionary government systematically exterminated over 117,000 civilian residents. That's 14% of the region's population, to wipe out a population that refused to give up their religion. So this was, of course, they were doing atheism wrong. I have no doubt about that. But yes, it's just disgusting. Your thoughts, guys?
Yeah, they were very clearly not very religious people. But yeah, we are also taught, like at the school, that it was a glorious revolution. It was phenomenal, and it had to happen, and it has paved the world to what it is now. They don't really tell us that this thing was a massacre. The likes the world pretty much had never seen before to their own people. Normally, these sort of things you would see when a country is going to conquer another country, but this was being done to their own people because of their beliefs systems, which, you know, when then you roll forward to the 21st century and see things heading in the direction of violence, you can see that it is always an ideology, but the ideology that is at the receiving end, they happen to be the evil Christians who are getting, you know, the sword by the atheists. Interesting.
Yeah, no, these scientific socialists were murdering people for not giving up religion. And atheists seem to want to constantly say, no, 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 that's not proper atheism. I mean, these are all atheists who claim to do things in the name of atheism, and they were proper atheists. And today's atheists feign ignorance to deny themselves any culpability in the fact that their philosophy, maybe it, you know, it doesn't have, if it's just a lack of belief, then it provides no positive values, right? But also it dissolves and removes all of those Christian ideas and all those laws based on Christian morality, like the Ten Commandments and natural law, that would have prevented all of these atrocities.
Exactly.
Yes. One final comment, which is that actually atheism is the religion of peace.
Oh, yes. You're right.
Sorry, Fandros.
No, so I was just going to say that it speaks volumes about the psyche of the people that want to get involved in atheism and want to commit these atrocities, because with objective theistic moral values, even if you have an inclination or a predisposition to do wrong, your relationship with your creator is going to give you that boundary to stop you doing what your inclination is. We all have inclinations to do things that are wrong, but it's our relationship with our creator that stops us from doing those things. Yet when you remove that objective theistic moral value, you're given license to basically to go with what the flesh wants you to do. I have to ask the question, what kind of conscience guilt did they feel after committing the atrocities? Did they walk away with any guilt with doing these things? Because it wasn't just a case of murder. Tying people together and drowning them or throwing them onto barges and sinking the barges is a kind of depravity that where there must have been some kind of relish and joy in the way that you were killing these people. That you know, to contrive such a method of killing people in this kind of manner is, for me, telling me a lot about the people that were doing these things and their mindset.
That is evil. That is people that are satanic. There is something genuinely twisted about them. So this is not.
Lloyd. It reminds me, Lloyd. You remember there's an account in the Bible where there's a man and he's possessed by several demons, I think it is. And I think it might be the account of Legion, but I stand to be corrected if it's another account. However, the demons turn around and say to Jesus, will you allow us to go into those pigs that are over on the cliff over there? Jesus says, yes, you can go into those pigs. The demons go into those pigs, they possess the pigs, and what do they do with the pigs? They rush the pigs over the mountain cliff, and the pigs die at the bottom of the mountain. There seems to be a fetish for demons getting some kind of deprived satisfaction out of torture and murder. So when you make the comment about, say, some kind of demonic influence, we have a precedent in the Bible where demons have actually behaved in the way that you've suggested.
No, there's something demonic. I think it's not the presence of science or reason, it's the absence of a filter. It's the absence of morality. It's the absence of objective morality. It's the replacement of that with, there's an interesting book I read once in the past that really was that's formative on me, and one of the questions he asked was about psychopaths and morality, and one of the questions was I think about how do you define what is a psychopath, right, or psychopathic morality, and he stated that psychopaths, they feel that they are the final arbiter of what is right, of what is just, of what is moral. He says normal human beings will stop and think, what would Jesus think of me if I did this? Or they would feel guilt because they would think of a figure that they look up to and respect, like their mother, their father, their uncle, some other figure, a brother they respected or something, and they would go, what would this person think of me? What would God think of me? How would this person view my action? And they would modify their behavior. But a psychopath goes, I make that decision, and they become God, judge, jury, arbiter in their own universe. And he says that is what psychopaths do, and this is psychopathic.
It's because they have no reverential fear of anything above them. They are the ones setting the fear. They have no reverential fear themselves.
Yeah. Sandra was saying that I won't do one of the, years ago I did heavy research on the Inquisition, and I've actually haven't had time to get around to it. I have a lot of research. You'd be amazed how much I actually have. I've just never, but the whole story of the Inquisition is false. I mean, I can tell you like 95% of what people have been saying for centuries about the Inquisition is entirely fictitious. The whole thing is just fake. It is propaganda. It is garbage. It is slop. It is rubbish from top to bottom. The whole idea was just an attempt to demonize, it's the usual story. It goes back to the Reformation, and it is lies from top to bottom. In fact, but this was an orchestrated campaign by the Protestant governments to entrench their position as moral and to demonize the Catholics, and they've lied about it, and it's become a heavily entrenched lie, which is a shame if it's supposed to be Christians and the church, and it's based on a bright, bold, disgusting set of historical lies that, it's filthy if that's the case, if it's supposed to be Christian, but it's based on nothing but lies. So, Cross and Crescent, I did invite you if you want to join us for a few minutes to share your thoughts. That'll be great. You're very welcome, of course. Okay, so guys, I'm at least in terms of my little summary document, which you guys can download, link in the chat, right? I just had an AI summarize my my slides to give us this, but it should give you a really good overview of just to give you an understanding of atheism. But you had Enlightenment atheism in history, right? You have people like Diderot, Voltaire, and the Baron de Holbach. He was famous as, I think, one of the first people, or the first person to write a book actively promoting atheism. And that could potentially lead us into a discussion on free speech. Free speech absolutism is very possibly, as someone said recently, a psyop developed in the 60s by liberals, by your Democrats and liberals, your woketards, to get everyone to go, well, we can't police speech because people need to be able to free to say what they want. No, you cannot say what you want, because under the law, under the founding fathers, under all sorts of accepted social standards, moral standards for centuries, one could not have absolute speech. There were standards, there were norms, there were things you did not say, there were things that were established, and these were what held society together, and you didn't discuss those things. There was speech that was banned, there was speech that was frowned upon, there was speech that was not appropriate. And of course, but once you allow absolute free speech and anyone can say whatever he likes, whenever he likes, then women have penises and men have vaginas, and men can have babies, and abortion after birth is acceptable. That's, yeah. There are things which we just should not even be discussing, because then you have to discuss ideas which have long been settled, and now you've got to defend ideas. And the problem is then you've forgotten how to defend them, because they were defended by intellectual and moral giants centuries ago, and we've forgotten. We've just assumed they're part of the social fabric. But now you've got to somehow defend these ideas of, we don't murder babies after they are born because you don't want them, because some lunatic has free speech, and his free speech becomes free action. And these ideas poison and infect communities, and we've been too tolerant. That is just another one of the sins of tolerance. And there are certain things that should not be said. There are certain ideas which we should know, no, we don't allow this, we don't discuss this, we don't promote this. Imagine some twat wants to discuss Nazism as a valid idea because free speech. Well, fuck that guy, because we know that's a bad idea. There's a lot of bad ideas, and we should not even be tolerating these ideas. We know what are good ideas, we know what are bad ideas. Socialism is a bad idea. If that one as well. Your guys' thoughts on that before I go on?
Two things. One is the fact that we're having the discussion in the first place of the things that we've brought up today. It's hard to imagine, say 50, 100 years ago, if we could go back in time, and that's to the people that are listening in the chat as well, that for many of us, maybe, particularly myself, who's 58, when I was in my teens, I would never have conceived of a world where these kind of discussions would have been taking place. It was beyond the realms of my thinking and my imagination. And it is a byproduct of atheism that we're actually having to have these discussions now. And they're not sort of like side discussions, covert discussions, and discussions happening in small groups. These are local, national, and international discussions. They're normal discussions now that are happening on mainstream media. That's how far into depravity we've become. But just going by another thing that you were just saying there, Lloyd, all of this that we're discussing does serve an absolute purpose, though. And it serves the purpose of Daniel 2:44 and why we need it. The independence that man has had from God, every known, contrived, possible form of government in opposition to God has been tried and tested. There's an interesting movie called Strange Days with Ralph Fiennes. One of the characters actually makes a comment in there about all the governments that mankind has ever had have all failed. Joe Rogan, in a recent conversation, was speaking to someone, I forget who it was, and Joe Rogan himself said, "We've tried it all, mate. We've tried all these governments and they've all failed. We can't seem to get it right." And for those that are in their 50s like I am, I've not seen the world get better as a result of man-made rule. I've seen things get worse, and I've never known things. So this, for me, I don't know how it works for everybody else, but for me personally, it vindicates God's name again. It proves why we need. So I look at it in a positive sense. I look at it from the point of view of, this is why we need God's government, because when you don't have objective theistic moral values, and when you don't have a government run by God, this is the world you inherit.
Right. JC, your thoughts on this? You've been quiet for a while.
Yeah, the most surprising thing of this material and the discussions that you have is about a lot of the people that you show. Once you actually show what they were like, one with have a brain would know that you have to steer clear of those people. But when I was at a school, these people were venerated. We were told that these people were the best of the best, and how we got where we are because of them. And for example, we didn't get to Karl Marx, so that's not someone that they discussed. They just at the school, they just pretty much ignored him. But that is what has happened in the next generation. It's like everything started maybe 3 generations ago, first with like Darwin, and saying what a phenomenal guy he was. And then actually, once you read into his life, you realize that he was a little bit of demon possessed. That is one generation. In the next generation, they get the next awful guys and they make them into heroes. And now here we are, they're making people like Marx or even Lenin as heroes. And it's like, why don't you go and speak to the Poles? I mean, you live in Poland, and they tried living under Soviet control for a long time. And the moment that they got out of it, is they couldn't be any more Christians. So they have actually experienced, against their will, what happens when you follow these ideologies. And thanks God that they have actually said, no, 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 we have to be as Christian as possible, and they will have to reconquer Europe at one point. But see, they have told us that these people were the best of the best. They shouldn't have done that. I think the world has a lot to unlearn.
And when you look at these people, you're going to find that these people are just degenerates. You know, yeah. So, guys, can should we just end off here with with these last items I've got here?
Sure.
Yes.
Enlightenment atheism defined itself in violent opposition to the church and the state, and its goal was to establish a utopian state focused on man. And it was going to bring reason and science to the table, and it turned lethal, and it had to be replaced because it failed. So yeah, real socialism hasn't been tried, except then when it was tried and it failed. Marxism, Leninism, you had Karl Marx, you had Friedrich Engels, you had V.I. Lenin, and a bunch of other influential figures. They claimed that atheism is an absolute inseparable foundation of scientific socialism. So you needed scientific atheism to support scientific socialism, because it's science, don't you know? And science never fails. And they reduced history to material conditions and class struggle. And they ended up influencing the 20th century in such a way that it became the most murderous, violent century in human history, and impoverished all of Africa. Africa is poor because of two things: corruption, because black culture is corrupt, and two, Marxism. Actually, I actually finished last year, about a year ago, I finished the talk on Marxism in Africa, how it destroyed Africa. I actually do need to talk about that, so let me get around to that very soon. Secular humanism. You have John Dewey, Julian Huxley, Paul Kurtz, right? As some names, just a handful of many, many names. This operates functionally as a non-theistic religion. So basically, it is Christianity with all the theological aspects stripped right out. They're trying to copy it. So it's a dead copy of Christianity with all of the functional living aspects stripped right out of it. So they want to retain Christian moral values while exalting human reason. In other words, human preference. In other words, human opinion. And they eliminate God, and they make man God. Man becomes the decider, and you have Adam and Eve all over again. And of course, then you have everyone deciding what gender they are. Your thoughts on this, guys, before I go on?
It's like, there's a certain irony, isn't there, that they live by a moral code. It's found in a book inspired by a God that they deny exists. So they have to plagiarize, steal, cut and paste, borrow, or graft the morality from a God that they challenge exists. There's a certain irony there. And I think what's also interesting as well is that you're noticing that that certain people that once advocated for atheism in a very vocal way, in a very popular way, Aya Ali Hirsi being one of them, who's now
Ayaan Hirsi Ali.
She's now come out and identified as a Christian. You now have, say, the apostate prophet that now identifies as being a Christian. And interestingly enough, the guy that wrote the book, The God Delusion, which basically, and who appeared on several programs in the United Kingdom, like the big questions for the BBC, used to turn around and say that bringing up a child in a religion was a form of child abuse, because you're brainwashing a child, has now come out as a cultural Christian. Not that there's any such thing as a cultural Christian, but now, because you see, I don't know what, do you know what cultural Christianity is? Because
I think even atheists are cultural Christians, because a lot of the ideas, a lot of the religious and social mores are derived from Christian ideas. I mean, for instance, you're not going to find atheists that are pro-slavery, because being anti-slavery is a very Christian idea, that came from Christian culture.
But you can't argue that slavery is wrong with atheism. Atheism would promote slavery, not go against it, because it's survival of the fittest and natural selection. It's one of the two. But the point I'm trying to get at is you can't have Christianity without Christians. So you have to have a bunch of people on the planet that are promoting the objective theistic moral values for you to, in order to be able to graft the culture from them and to live by that culture. If you press the button and remove Christianity from the planet, if you press the button and you remove Christianity from the history of the planet, what will these atheists call themselves then? They're not going to be cultural Christians then, are they? So they need Christianity. They're grasping for Christianity. They absolutely require Christianity for their own existence, because they bring
you don't see them spending time attacking Islam, do you?
Yeah, no, exactly. They bring nothing to the table. I think what's happened is with people like Richard Dawkins, they've been promoting atheism. God is a delusion and blah, 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 and all the pejoratives that you can think of. And they've created such a vacuum that they're looking out the window and thinking, what the heck have we done with the world that we've created today? We've promoted this, and look what we've done. So it's almost like
you can't have Christianity without Christians. You know, you also can't have Western civilization without Westerners. You cannot have the English without the English. You know, and you're being replaced. So you're either being eliminated or you're being replaced. Look at Nigeria, as someone raised earlier. They're killing the Christians. Look, how many Christians are there in Saudi Arabia, right? How many Jews are there? They've killed them all. They've displaced them all. They've ethnically cleansed them all across all of the Arab countries, the Muslim countries. So yeah, there is a force afoot that is trying to destroy everything that is Christian or Christian derived. Whatever was Christendom, this is under attack, and this is all part and parcel, I think, of a general coordinated effort to eliminate whatever is derived from, built on Christianity, Christian law, and so on. And to falsify the history, to smear, to demonize, and you need to know the facts. You need to know the truth. And atheism is actually quite easily debunked once you go through its history, go through its founding figures, go through its core documents, and especially modern atheism and its ties to the most totalitarian, oppressive, violent.
I would argue as well, when you look at certain crimes that have been committed in America and Europe lately, have you noticed that there's been a black and white divide amongst all of these things?
That started with Obama.
And I think one of the reasons for the black and white divide and this racism raising its head in any and every opportunity at the moment is possibly another way of undermining the biblical narrative, because to many people, Christianity is seen as a white man's religion. And if you villainize white men, by proxy, you're villainizing Christianity.
And actually, probably more as well, because, well, according to the Hadith, Muhammad was a lot whiter than Jesus. But never mind, he didn't exist. But yeah, the thing is, what you said before, which is you cannot have Christian values without Christians. That is absolutely spot on. And but an atheist doesn't see that, because he's been told that basically basically it works like this: God doesn't exist. Therefore, the 10 Commandments, they are not by God. They are by very clever people. And then the 10 Commandments, they are good, and they are about people because we created them. But guess what? Now we can change them because we created them before. So now we can add to them and change and evolve. And then look at the state of Europe right now. So it's like a trap. An atheist would never accept that morality comes from God. I know, because I was there. It will always be like, no, but I can just sit down and reason, and I will treat people the way I want to be treated, and that is morality. It's like you're basically in a loop. You cannot get out of it. Everything is human, and we can decide for ourselves. And every time that is done, well, bad things happen.
Yeah, Christianity is, I think, Islam is starting to have a problem, like the Islamic dilemma. And all these Qurans and all these things we're learning, Islam is on the ropes. I mean, certainly, look, I'm not saying they're not a threat, but there are cracks appearing. I just want to mention, I mean, back in the 80s, the 90s, there were no black-white divides like there are today. Woke has only made things worse. right?
Absolutely.
Who remembers Rocky and Apollo Creed? He beats Apollo Creed. Apollo Creed respects him. He becomes his friend. He becomes his trainer. He helps him. I mean, this was powerful stuff back then. And now I know for a fact blacks hate white people. There's a lot of that going around. There's a lot of toxic hatred around, and this is a problem. Yeah.
Dude, I was around in the 80s and 90s. I did the whole UK dance scene. Black and white people came and created ska. Black and white people did disco. Black and white people did Chicago house music, Philadelphia house music. Black and white people did acid house music. Black and white people did rave. They did jungle. They did drum and bass. You know, black and white people have done and sports as well. Black and white people, it's always been black. Brown has never been found in all of this. It's always been black and white people, which is what disturbs me, because I'm seeing things now. I'm thinking, where the heck did all of this come from? How the heck did all of this come from?
This is all. I mean, yeah, this is all race Marxism. It's all critical theory, as Valena says. It's all part of the woke agenda. And Chloe Cox is right. The Marxist Fabian regime, like the Labour Party in the UK, wants to erase the indigenous population, and people can feel it. Also in Ireland, immigrants are given priority for housing. It's happening everywhere. And the pushback, people are starting to learn about this, and they're starting to push back. And we need to learn about the threats. And the more we learn about Islam and atheism and associated socialism, because the Labour is a socialist party, you need to understand that these people are anti-life, they're anti-Christian. UK was the country, the Christian country that abolished slavery. You have a lot to be proud for. In fact, I should do a talk called The Case for Colonization. Colonization was one of the best things to ever happen to the rest of the world. And to be honest, apartheid, there are good reasons for that in South Africa, right? And you're learning it right now as young boys are being stabbed for no reason by people of melanin, right? You're starting to learn why there was apartheid. As you see tribal race wars flaring up, as you learn about things like, you learn that the Muslim grooming gang scandal is actually the Muslim rape gang scandal. Actually, it's not just that. It's actually the Muslim child sex trafficking scandal. Actually, no, it's the Muslim Pakistani child international sex trafficking scandal that would put Epstein to shame. As you learn about these things, as these things are going to come out, you're going to realize why apartheid was such a great idea in many ways. And so I know that's controversial, but really, I am sick and tired of people misrepresenting apartheid. And there were reasons. There were certainly reasons, because when you have violent, uncontrolled, hateful ideologies infecting people that don't want to develop, don't want to grow, don't want to achieve, then you have what the West is seeing today. South Africa was a test case for this. And they succeeded, and now they're taking that same idea and they're pushing it on the rest of the world. So thank you, Chloe. Yes, Hut and Touch tomorrow with Thunderous, and hopefully, with Sama. Let's just finish here. Then, of course, you have Darwinism and social Darwinism, right? You had Charles Darwin, Ernst Haeckel, Herbert Spencer, and others. And don't forget, every one of Darwin's kids was involved in the eugenics movement. They were all eugenicists. People claim Darwin wasn't in the eugenics. Bullshit. The man was a serious eugenicist. His entire family headed up the eugenics movement. So he created a materialist paradigm that removed final causes from nature. So they devalued human life by normalizing the ruthless survival of the fittest, because they believed that warfare, starvation, famine, and other means of getting rid of people basically cleansed the human race of its weakest, ugliest, least desirable stock and left you with only the best. So therefore, going out and genociding people was good, because it helped the human race get better. And so this provided biological justification for 20th century eugenics, racism, and certain atrocities. And then finally, we have atheistic Satanism. You have Anton LaVey as an example, and even guys like Crowley, who made the same claims, supposedly that Satan was an amoral metaphor for self-interest, for the self. There was no actual Satan, you. It was all about you finding your own path right? And so basically, and they all promoted Enlightenment values. The Enlightenment is really just Satanism with one step less. So yeah, guys, I think we can sort of end here. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
So guys, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Lloyd, for this evening. Nice to see you again, and for JC as well. Thank you for this evening. I thought it was a good, enjoyable conversation. But I would like to thank you. I would like to apologise to everybody if anybody thought that my spontaneous gag was inappropriate. I sincerely apologise. I couldn't help myself.
Yeah, a lot of confidence there. You know, that confidence is good. Confidence is good. Yeah, the claim that there's no real evil, exactly. Yeah. JC.
Yeah, maybe just one final thought after all of this from the position of atheism, which is quite similar to Islam to a degree, which is about questioning others' beliefs, but not supporting yours. One of the most powerful questions that we have in our vocabulary is the question why. It's quite simple. Women use this one a lot, like why, and you know it's always a trap. So this is the thing. You will have atheists asking questions like, okay, so you're a Christian, why would God send his son to the world and then make him go through all of that? And the premise of that question is, I know best. God wouldn't do that, as though, you know, the atheist would know. But that is how the question is loaded. That why is saying it doesn't make sense. Because if God has the power of Thanos with infinity stones, he can just, you know, flick his fingers and make all of us disappear or be better or whatever. And he doesn't. He's questioning God. However, when you're a Christian, what you ask, and these are some of the conversations I've had as well with Andros, is like, no, but why did he do it? Because sure, God would have an infinite number of ways of doing things, but why would he do that in that specific manner instead of going with another course of action? So we know that he does it for a reason, and then exploring that reason is what gives us actually wisdom. Very often we actually land in free will. There is an element of free will which is central to everything that God does without removing that free will from us. So if we wanted to be evil, we could. And then he sent his only begotten son. And us as humans would say, well, but he could do something else. Yes, he could do lots of things. Is the problem with the question why? Instead of questioning why, like for real, what is the purpose behind it? Let's understand it and become more intelligent as a result. Instead of that, is like, why? But what you really mean as an atheist is it doesn't make any sense. I know better. So that's my final thought.
Yeah, no, agreed. Yeah, so guys, thank you very much. I think we'll end it here. It's been nearly 2 hours, so thank you very much for the time. And yeah, we'll be back again, and we'll have lots of interesting discussions here. Some of these very difficult discussions, but hopefully they help you in dealing with others, in answering questions, and yeah, just finding peace and finding answers. And yeah, it's not always easy. YouTube doesn't like me having these difficult discussions, these difficult topics. My channel is actively suppressed, so please like, do share, do subscribe. And every time you like, YouTube apparently shares it with its algorithm to 10 other people on YouTube. So please do share. And yeah, for those who do support the channel, thank you very, very much. It really does help. I appreciate it. And yeah, because actually running a channel is not free. There's software costs. There's all sorts of fun things. So yeah, thank you guys very much. Thanks, guys, for the great discussion. And we shall see you all tomorrow night. Take care, everyone. Good night. God bless.